Well, I'm glad to be here. My name's Kelly, and you can remember that by Cowboy Kelly. I am a co-owner with my brother of Barton Ranch, and that's located on the Arizona Strip. Anybody heard of the Arizona Strip? A couple of you? It's not too far from here. We also have a ranch in, the Arizona Strip is south of the southern Utah, so south of the Utah border. Everything south of the Utah border to the Grand Canyon. It's kind of this isolated strip of land that's called the Arizona Strip. And we also have a ranch in Penguich, Utah as well. So we kind of on both sides of Cedar. My brother and I grew up on the ranch. It's a family business. And whoops, wrong way. Did I mess anything up?
No, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
And the ranch is probably around 250,000 acres. We run a couple thousand head of cows. And we also have a really cool tourism business where we cater to the river rafters that are going down through the Grand Canyon. And today, so we could spend an hour talking about any one of the little side businesses that are connected somehow to the ranch. But today I thought it'd be fun to talk about the cows. And I think using business practices it really doesn't matter whether it's cows or whether it's software. Like there's fundamental business practices that that you kind of got to adhere to, and you got to be ready for, and use them to your benefit. So, and cows are fun. Pictures of horses. Who's been on a horse before? Raise your hand. Oh, nice. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Who knows somebody that owns a ranch or has a ranch? A few of you. Wow, this is awesome. Okay, so you're not going to be completely unfamiliar with this. My great-grandfather came to southern Utah and northern Arizona with the Mormon pioneers, and they brought cows with them, and they started ranching. And this is my great-grandfather right here, and these are all of his sons. Isn't that amazing? This is my grandfather. So my great-grandfather came in like 1860, and there was no cattle. He brought cows, and it was like cattle were king. And by 1900, my great-grandfather was like a millionaire. That was a lot of money back then. It actually is probably a lot of money today, but you can imagine how much money $1 million was back in 1900. Guess where they sold their cattle back in 1860? There was no roads and no railroads. So if you wanted to sell your product, you had to peddle it to the local communities, right? So like they would trail their cows from the ranch to like St. George, mining camp, Silver Reef, the copper mines out here to the west, and you would either butcher it on site or sell that animal live to the customer, and then they would butcher it. So, and that's what he did, is he sold beef. He just peddled it around to the local communities. Direct marketing, right? My grandpa, this is my dad, but my grandpa, when he grew up, is when the railroads sent spur lines down closer to southern Utah, and they would actually trail it. They did less direct marketing and more trailing the cattle to the railheads. They would load the cattle live, and it would take about a week, and they would ride with the cattle, unloading them each night at a different city, watering them, feeding them, until they would get to Chicago. And then Chicago had these big stockyards right at the railways where they would butcher the animals and then distribute it throughout the population. My dad came along in the late 60s and early 70s, and the interstate systems have been implemented, and we could get cows now to the Midwest within 24 hours on a semi-truck. And so the beef industry changed to the feedlot system that we know today, okay? So my dad turned into what was called a cow-calf producer. So all the cows now were just to produce calves. In 6 months, they were sold to a person a buyer that would truck them to the feedlots. The feedlots would feed them for a year, and this is largely is what is going on today. Then the feedlots would sell them to the packing plants, and the packing plants sell them to a wholesaler, and then the wholesaler sells them to a grocery store, right? Or a restaurant. So today, when you go to the grocery store and you buy a pound of ground beef, on average, that animal has had 7 different owners during its lifetime, and it has traveled 1,400 miles, okay? So, interestingly, my grandpa, trailing the cattle to the railroads, he made a really nice living, but he was only like half a millionaire. And then when my dad came along in the 80s, he went broke. Like in the 70s and 80s, there were more ranches and farms that closed down and went broke because of market forces, high interest rates, poor economy, and we lost a lot of family. The family farm really turned into kind of the corporate farms of today. And so if you weren't big enough, you couldn't compete. So during this time, if you wanted to be a rancher, and I think it still is the same today, if you wanted to be a rancher, you got an off-farm job, okay? So that's what my dad did. Oh, all of you people that raised your hands about that you know ranchers or have some connection to a farm, how many people do you know, I should say raise your hand if you know a full-time rancher? Full-time rancher, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So like everybody knows a rancher, but only like 4 or 5 of you know a full-time rancher, right? It has become very rare. And so my dad was, he was super entrepreneurial, and he the ranch he bought was like it was the Woods Ranch. It was the furthest out on the Arizona Strip, and it was hard to get to in a 1971 pickup truck, and it's still hard to get to in a modern pickup truck. 65 miles of dirt road from the nearest town, the nearest public utilities, and that's where my dad was able to find a ranch that was for sale, and he was excited. But then he was going broke he just couldn't make enough money to overcome the expense of having a ranch. So he found that the benefit, the blessing of being so remote was that we were on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So this is actually the south rim of the Grand Canyon. The ranch sits down in the Grand Canyon, just 10 miles from the inner gorge. And so he thought, hey, maybe we could build a lodge and start catering, do some tourism. And so that's where I came in. I grew up building that. I grew up building the lodge. I was 10 years old. So it was just it was so fun for me, right? I was like running around thinking I was doing so much, and I was just playing around. But they built this lodge in 1983. Here's an entrepreneurial tidbit that you might want to write down. These people walking around the lodge, I mean, there's no landscaping. If you could see back here, there was like a 5 kW like gas-powered generator that's like sitting in the back with like a frayed extension cord going into the lodge, and the water supply would have never passed inspection in today's world, and they were open for business. Okay, and the principle that I'm trying to teach you, and that my parents taught me, was like you got to have a good plan, and it's got to be a long range plan, but you got to get the doors open. You know, I think with businesses we plan and we plan and we plan, and we're like, okay, I'm getting there, I'm close. I got to just figure this out. I got to get this finished. I got to, and you can do that until the cows come home. Nobody got that? And so, I mean, I look back and I'm totally amazed that they were open for business, and they were generating income. And this was like this is so far from where it is today, right? And so sometimes you got to pull the trigger and go for it. And I think that separates you probably from at least 50% of the other entrepreneurs that are out there saying, I'm going to own my own business. I'm going to be my own person. And they're just going to be planning and planning and planning and planning. Like at some point you got to pull the trigger and let market forces force you to do the hard work to get it finished. But so that was the environment I grew up in. We had cows around us. We had this nice sized ranch. I thought I was a cowboy, but I was always just really doing tourism. You know, my mom and dad taught us how to sing and dance. Every night we put on this country show, and we were like the Osmonds of the Arizona Strip, and we were rated the best country western program on the entire Arizona Strip for 10 years in a row. So it was the only one on the Arizona Strip. But I always had this dream of being a full-time rancher, right? And so my dad was an educator, and he wouldn't hire us full-time until we got a college degree. And so I was trying to check the boxes so I could get full-time on the ranch. But I had a dream, if I could get back to the ranch, I want to be a full-time rancher. So that's where we talk about a new direction. But as I did my research, all my research projects and all my business papers were about this like dream. Like I was formulating how I was going to be a full-time rancher. And as I was doing this research, I realized that my new direction was just an old direction, because I hatched this brilliant idea that we would just have our cattle butchered, and I would peddle the beef, and I would cut out all 7 other owners of the meat supply chain, and I could get $50, $100 for each one of those. So I'd do all those jobs, sell it right to the customer. I was even going to separate myself from the retail outlets, and that's how I could do it. And the numbers were really cool. And I was like, oh man, I'm so excited. And I started to do research, and I realized I was just doing what my great-grandfather did. So it's funny how things are just cyclical, right? So this is a graphic that just kind of shows you the beef industry, kind of as it's been circular in my case. And my great-grandfather in 1860 direct marketed. That was his only choice, okay? When the railroads came in, they began to ship the cattle to the population centers, and it went away from direct marketing. 1940 to 1960, they started to specialize and bring in some really cool genetics from Great Britain, and started making these awesome Angus and Red Angus and even Continental cattle. They started to make really superior beef quality animals. Before that, they were rangy cattle. They were offspring of wild cattle, the Longhorns and whatnot. And so now we're really getting good, efficient genetics in America and even in southern Utah. And they were going to a feedlot. And also what it coincided was the cattleman was king. He was half a king, and he went broke. Okay, so I'm like, hey, I like being a king. I think I'm gonna try to direct market our beef. It was pretty naive thinking, and it hasn't been super easy, but it has been so fun. I'm telling you guys, I look back at over the last 15 years, and we've created something really cool. This is what the cows look like. 1860, it was not the greatest beef cow in the world. But it wasn't the skinniest milk cow either. It was kind of an in-between, because they would milk this cow. My great-grandfather would milk a cow like this, and they would preserve the milk by making cheese and butter. And then that cow would also produce a calf that could be used for beef. So every 2 or 3 weeks, they would take beef, milk, and butter off of the Arizona Strip and peddle it around town. This is when, during the railroads, you can see all these steers. They're kind of rough looking, but those are 4-year-old steers. So the cattle would just stay on the ranch and live out on the desert for about 4 years. And then they'd have these big cattle drives where they would gather them all up and trail them a week or two to the trailheads, or to the rail heads. This is what the cattle looked like in the the 1940s through the 1960s. This era, I feel like I was born too late. These are the kind of cattle that work for us today in our direct marketing system. They're super easy fleshing. There's high quality beef, and this talk is right before lunch. I hope you guys are getting hungry. But this is primo beef. And but what happened is when the feedlot system came in and they're putting the cattle into these big feed yards, and as ownership of cattle was being consolidated. So today, there's 3 companies that will own over 80% of every cow that is produced, every calf that's produced in America. Okay, so it's all consolidated. There's great big companies that own these feedlots in the Midwest. So these cows, they finished way too quick and they were too small. Okay, because most of the cost that a feedlot has is the shipping and trucking expenses. So once they get them there, they want to hold them and get them to be much bigger than this animal right here. So this is what the Black Angus turned into, was a longer, taller, much heavier animal. But this animal doesn't thrive out on the desert. It needs corn to really express its genetic potential. So it worked, but the problem is that his mother looks just like him, and she suffers out on the Arizona Strip, right? Because she just can't eat enough food each day to take care of herself. And so it was a combination of market forces, and then the cows out on the desert started to require more inputs, and that's expensive. And so that's one of the reasons that I feel like our ranch became less profitable. So I got this big idea, right? We're going to direct market, and my dad always said you got to have a good plan, and so I spent some money and some time to kind of formulate, like, really, what can we do this? Is it profitable? What is it going to take? And because I knew we had a ranch, and so I started to evaluate our own resources. What I found was that I grew up on the Arizona Strip in the desert, and our cows always looked skinny, and so I thought, well, if I had a better ranch, maybe the cows would look better. But I went all over the country and spent time on ranches in New York and Florida and Massachusetts and Montana, and all the cows were skinny everywhere, and it like blew me away. Like, these are in great lush green pastures, but they were skinny. And the reason is the genetics needed corn diet to really get fat, okay? So I found that our cows just wouldn't work for my big, takeover of the beef industry. And I also realized that it was kind of a mongrel herd. We had red cows and white cows and brown cows and big cows and skinny cows, and they all produced a little bit different tasting and quality of beef. So if we're going to sell a product direct to a customer, they want to buy the same product every day, right? Each time they want to have the same experience or better, and we didn't have the cattle that would do that. But the cool thing is that as I started to research some of these old genetics, I found out that, hey, that's the kind of beef that we need, and it's also the kind of mother cow that will thrive on my ranch. So I'm going to reduce my expenses. Just running that cow, she's going to take a lot less protein supplements through the winter. She's going to take a lot less salt. She's going to take a lot less care. So that's all savings and expenses. And then that's also the genetics that will finish easy on grass and give a repeatable and gourmet experience for my customers. So I was like, oh, I'm going to make more money, and I'm going to reduce my expenses, right? It's not rocket science, folks. And so we had to realize, okay, so this is a niche market, because grass-fed beef 15 years ago, like, it was fringe. Has everybody heard of grass-fed beef today? Raise your hand if you've heard of grass-fed beef. Yeah. If I would have asked you that question 15 years ago, there would have been like 1 or 2 hippies on the corner off to the side. They would be like, oh yeah, we know grass-fed beef. That stuff's good for you. Thanks, appreciate it. And now I am like that hippie on the side. I just want to like clarify, like, I've been called, I was doing a presentation for the city of Boulder up by north of Escalante, and they got done and they're like, you're a hippie, aren't you? Oh no, I guess I am. So the niche market was grass-fed beef, and we did research. We found that there was and also high quality. So it's grass-fed, and we wanted gourmet quality. And so it's like we were a niche within a niche. but we did do our market research. We saw that there was a shortage of high quality beef. These companies that own all the cattle in the U.S. it's really hard to do something exceptional when you're that big. Like a medium grade is about as good as they were doing at the time, the feed yards and the genetics in America. But they owned all the beef and they had the marketing. So they just told us that Iowa grain-fed beef was the greatest beef in the world. And we eat it and we're like, America loves beef. And we're like, yeah, that's dang good. But it's not. It's not the best beef in the world. And if you can take certain genetics and you can give them a certain level of nutrition, okay, you can beat it. You can beat it every day of the week. But they had convinced America and the world that what they were producing was the greatest. But what we found is that there was a niche market there where we could do better than them, and they would never be able to match us in quality, okay? Because I can't compete with Cargill and Monsanto. These are massive companies. And so if a niche market is probably defined as a niche market because it can't be repeated easily. And it definitely can't be repeated on a large scale. So like, I'm looking at 1% of the market that's looking for gourmet and grass-fed beef, okay? I realized that 1% of the population of the United States would be willing to buy my product. And I also realized that if I did it correctly, that the big boys would never be able to take my customer from me. It's outside of their possibilities. And but the problem was that there weren't these cattle. These cattle didn't exist in America. Like everybody had feedlot genetics, and I needed those old-fashioned genetics. I wish that my grandpa would have saved a few of those. And so also we felt like environmentally and also social acceptance of these big ag corporations, we could see that it was an unsustainable model, and that there were questions that were being pushed back into the background about sustainability, about environmental impact, and the humane nature of big ag. And so we were going to be like, as a cow-calf producer, I remember being devastated when somebody like Oprah Winfrey would go on TV and say, our beef is unsafe. Okay, the next day, calf prices would tank. And that was my one day to get a paycheck where all of our calves go to market, dude, it was just devastating. I hated Oprah Winfrey. If there was an E. coli outbreak that there was, 500 million pounds of ground beef tainted with E. coli and recall, calf prices would tank. And I was like, dang it, I hate people that don't know how to cook their beef right. And I was always like just trying to defend my position, right? But when I got looking at this niche market, I saw, oh my gosh, like when Oprah Winfrey bags on big ag, and nowadays it's like documentaries on Netflix and whatnot, it drives people to us. And when there's a big E. coli outbreak, it drives customers to people like us because of the model that we've implemented. So we believed that there was people that were willing to pay a premium for our product if we could find the right cattle, find the right ground, and then identify who those people were. So first things first, we had to get the right kind of cattle. And guess where we found them? We went to New Zealand, where there's no feedlots. So all their cattle are still finished on grass and on pasture. And so we found these really cool genetics. Once again, this is the Red Devon. This was the bull that was like, he's like, oh, all you cowboys are like, man, that's a nice bull. This bull was in New Zealand, and we purchased frozen embryos and semen. We imported them to America. We put that into our cows, and they started producing half Devon and full Devon offspring. So that was the basis of our grass-finished, gourmet quality, grass-finished, and reproducible product. By the way, this bull got so popular that they actually put him in a crate and put them on a 747 and flew them to America.
So, you talked about experience and stuff like that. How did the Red Devon acclimate to I'm guessing the planet of Earth?
Yeah, right. Way different, right? See, that's the beauty of it. That's a great question. Like, how can you take an animal whose genetics were adapted for this lush environment of New Zealand, right? These grass-finished genetics are super easy doing cattle that are adaptable, okay? So they're just, like, life is so cush for these cows. They take one bite of grass and can survive for a long time. Whereas a feedlot animal has to continually graze. Like, I mean, I used to go to ag conferences, and they would literally say how many hours a day one of these feedlot cows had to graze to survive, not to produce anything, not to milk, just to survive. And I was like, man, there's a lot of days where I'm not sure that a cow has that much time in the day, right? But these easy fleshing cattle are so adaptable because it's like, oh, it's a new environment, but I only need a couple bites of grass to survive, right? And I'm exaggerating it, but if that answers the question, okay? So they've done phenomenally well. The other thing is I thought the cattle needed to be wild. So like we had wild cows and we'd ride up on our horses and pooh, it was like jackrabbits everywhere. And Preston back there, he's my boy, and he'd be like 3 years old. And I'm like, Preston, you're on your own. You see that mountain over there? If you get lost, you just head toward that mountain. And everybody goes in different directions, right? Preston grew up lost most of the time. And what we found is that which brings up another point, a lot of the things that we just consider as gospel, so to speak, isn't necessarily true. And if you leave here with several nuggets, I think this is one of them, that you should always question the status quo. Okay? In whatever industry you're in or whatever niche market you want to enter, question the status quo. Okay? What does that mean? Give me a definition.
Kind of like challenge the norm.
Yeah.
Like if there's a habit, there could be other habits that are better.
Absolutely. So it's just challenging the norm, right? Is it really? So have you guys heard that old story about the grandmother that cuts off the end of the pot roast and cooks it, and then the mother did the same thing, right? Like, I guess you cut off the end of the roast, before you cook it. And then the daughter came along and said, would you teach me how to do a pot roast? And she's like, yeah, first you cut the end off, put it in a pot, put it in the stove. And the granddaughter said, why do we do that? And she's like, because that's what grandma did, okay? So she went to grandma, and that's what her mom said. She went back to her grandma, and grandma said, Grandma, why do you cut the end of the pot roast off, or the roast, before you put it in the pot? And grandma says, I don't know, my mom always just did that. And luckily, great-grandma was still alive. Went and asked great-grandmother, Grandma, why do we all cut the end of the roast off? Like, what does that do? She's like, are you serious? Like, are you seriously asking that? And they're like, yeah. It's like, because my pot was too small. It had nothing to do with flavor or cooking time or anything, right? And if somebody wouldn't have questioned the status quo, good criminy, they'd still be cutting the end of the roast off, right? So sometimes you get to the bottom of it, and it's not, it doesn't work for us today. So question the status quo. So we got the right cattle, and then we had to figure out who our customer was, and we did our research again and began to sell our beef, and we found that it's health conscious people and even vegetarians, right? I love those late night phone calls, like, hey, don't tell anybody I'm a vegetarian, but my doctor says I'm going to die if I don't get some iron and some really quick protein. I'm like, hey, I got your back. We got it. I'm like, I used to be a vegetarian too. They're like, what? No way. What changed? I'm like, my teeth came in. So, got to have empathy. Write that down. So also beef connoisseurs, like it's really fun to take our beef to like really high-end restaurants. I remember when Mario Batali got some of our first purebred grass-fed steaks, and said it would stand up against any steak he's ever had. People that the finest steak in the world is always going to be a grass-fed steak. Okay. Also, the worst steak in the world is always a grass-fed steak, so got to be careful. It can taste like cardboard if it's not the right genetics and the right grass. Also, urbanites seeking a connection to the land and their food. As more and more people have moved to the cities, they've got this nostalgia in their head and their minds about this connection to the land and the people that their ancestors used to, where they came from, right? Their roots. And so they love the idea of knowing who their rancher is and to be connected and supporting somebody out in the wilds. Environmentalist, our production model is all about the environment. It's about using natural processes. It's about sequestering carbon. And it's what you would call sustainable ag, but I don't like that idea. I don't like that term. I say regenerative. To me, I don't want to sustain anything that's not working. Okay, so I'm not a fan of sustainability if it's not something that we want to sustain, right? So I want to regenerate. I want to bring hope and optimism and room to grow to agriculture. So I like the word regenerative ag. Soccer moms, this is cool. Almost daily we talk to young moms and dads who they're not rich, and we're charging a premium because it's not inexpensive to source the right genetics and to give them the proper nutrition throughout their life. But they believe in the value of high quality meat to feed their children, and so they're willing to spend a larger portion of their income, sacrifice a larger portion of their income to buy our beef, and that's humbling as a producer, and I think as an entrepreneur, the feedback that you get from your customer, the thank yous, my life has improved because of your product. Those are the pats on the back that you get when the money is trying to catch up to the efforts. The problem is that it's the 1%, okay? And really quick we learned that doing mass marketing just was too expensive. Like, you can't afford to contact 99 people or 100 people to get one customer. Our product wasn't that expensive. So some of the opportunities and challenges that we've had, this is a grass-fed beef. Like, as you know, most of you have heard of these markets. It has been a fast-growing segment, direct marketing and grass-fed beef in the protein sector, and then it allows us to be more independent with our management decisions. I'm running the type of cow that is adapted to my environment, okay, and I don't have to bring in genetics that don't work just because a feedlot is demanding it, okay. So I feel like we're able to make more independent decisions, and I love control. I would say most entrepreneurs probably a little bit are kind of control freaks to a certain degree. Been to some counseling and things like that. It's a more sustainable business model. I believe that in the early 2000s, we had an opportunity to buy a bunch of our neighboring ranches, and they were always from like 80-year-olds and over. They were generational ranches that were being sold for the first time. And since we had worked super hard on our tourism business, we had a little bit of extra money that we were able to leverage everything time and time again and buy these ranches. And I thought, yay, we're the biggest ranchers in the Arizona Strip, and like I felt good because I was competitive and I wanted to be the biggest, right? But then all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of rocks. I was like, wait a second, we are purchasing an increasing share of a decreasing market. That is no place to be. And if I wouldn't have gone to school, I probably would have never figured that out. And I don't think you have to be careful. Just because it's for sale, there's probably a reason that it's for sale, right? And you don't want to gain an increasing share of a decreasing market, okay? And And so that's what when I also started to formulate this niche market, it was like, hey, if we do the same thing, we're guaranteed to have the same result as these old people. I want a sustainable business. I want one that builds strength generationally and that blesses the lives of like my kids and my grandkids, and that there's opportunity and growth within agriculture. Like, that's crazy thought today, but my great-grandfather sure believed in it, and it worked for several generations. One thing is that it's better for our local economies. This is just another feel-good thing, but it's true. We would sell a calf at weaning at 6 months of age, and we would get paid, let's say, $500, and that calf would go to Oklahoma. The grocery store would get a couple $1,000s out of that animal, right? So $500 stays in Utah, and the rest of the money, the $1,500, is spread throughout the United States, okay? Today, every single one of the animals that we produce on our ranch goes into our meat market, okay? And we're retailing for close to $3,000 per animal. And so all $3,000 stays right in our community, right? And so like rural Utah, rural America struggles. It's looking for more infusion of cash. I think that it's challenging, but it's also an opportunity. And there's opportunities in rural communities, and governments are starting to realize this and actually try to incentivize people to operate outside of city limits. But so if it does grow the economy in your state, in your community, it provides jobs. We don't keep obviously all $3,000. Like, if we're lucky, we keep a small portion of that, but it goes to the local slaughter plant in Fillmore. It goes to the feed stores in town. It goes to St. George Ford when we buy a truck, you know. So it just builds your economy. It actually brings money from outside of the state into the state. And the cool thing about ag, I got to tell you, like, it's such an unfair advantage. We literally are producing something from dirt and grass. I mean, really from the soil. Like, every year, a new calf appears, like out of thin air. If that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what does. Like, it's like I look at it as kind of like it's a factory that like this money tree. It's like a money factory. Like, every year we just get printed another one, and it comes out of the ground. It's wild. But were we looking at it like that in ag? If I would dare say that most ag students and families are going to ag is horrible. We don't get enough money, and all those things are true. But if you can find a niche market, you can make your way, and it comes with a lot of work and sacrifice. Well, we got two breeds on this place. One that can winter herself, do without grass and water all summer, and make money. And the other one we tip our hats to and lose our shirts. So these were the kind of cows that the feedlots liked. They hated the desert, but they loved the feedlots. And these are the kind of cows that we're producing today. And I think that it's also a great graphic for any business that you want to start. You need to identify these. These are efficient. These are money makers. And these are inefficient. And it's just a money pit. And sometimes we prop stuff up so long and it just drains the business. And you got to weed those out and say, cut your losses on that, old girl. And put your money over here and make more of these. The way I see it, this was like a downward spiral. The feedlot trends had made the cow herds less efficient, less fertile, larger, harder doing mongrel animals. Cow-calf producers were beholden to the feedlot trends, and the feedlot type mother cow requires more and more expensive supplements and drugs to be productive. And the end result, get an off-farm job to pay for it, or you get a bigger ranch so you can live with a smaller margin. Neither one of those is a great idea. Like, does that excite anybody? Well, it does excite big ag. They love it. There's an opportunity for big ag because it gives them a chance to go up and gobble up all these small ranches and control the entire meat sector of a huge country of 350 million people. But you and I go broke doing that. Maybe not Landon, but you and I would. So the way I see it is more of like an expanding economy that is built-in strength into this system. And it really, as we got into this niche market, we really did turn into hippies. I mean, I'm down in my pastures in Panguitch, and I'm turning over soil, and I'm counting the number of earthworms in the soil, and I'm taking Brix readings of our grasses, which is a sugar reading that correlates directly with the mineralization that's in my grasses. And I've found that if we have healthy soil, and we select the right animals to eat the forage off of that healthy soil, so you have healthy soil, healthy forage, healthy animals, and when you go and butcher that animal and have it analyzed, our beef is at a minimum 4 times more nutritious than any beef that you'll find at the grocery store, okay? And it's and it's just letting nature do its thing, staying out of the way. But we don't get paid for that premium product. I don't get paid 4 times for my premium beef if I send it to a feedlot. I have to butcher it, and I have to peddle it to the local community to get my premium. And that's what we've been doing. Our business we've been direct marketing beef now for close to 15 years. And I think the first year we sold 30 head, and today I'm not sure the exact number, but we're within like 1 or 2 of the largest family-owned grass beef producing companies in America. Okay, and it's taken time, and it's taken resources, and it's taken dedication to do it. But now, like, it was kind of, there's a saying that says, if you have a small dream, you can expect a small struggle, and you can expect a small victory. That they're all about relative in size. If you have a big dream, there's no way around it. You're going to have a big struggle. But get ready for a huge victory, okay? And looking back, it was a bit of a naive dream. It didn't happen as fast as we wanted. Huge struggle. I wish, like, these are paydays for me, because like we feel like we're king of the world, and we're selling beef to people all over the world, and we're blessing our economy, our local communities. And we're, on Sunday, I had one of our beef customers tell me, a gluten-free person, and they tried all these different diets to get healthy, and they can't, and they switched to a carnivore diet. Barfed beef's their #1 product that they eat, and they've been able to do away with all of their supplements that they used to have to take daily to feel good. And it's like those sort of comments are like, wow, we really do have a superfood here, and it's fun to eat. And so we get those comments every day, and it makes you feel really good. But it didn't come without like reversing paradigms. There's opportunities there, right? But I'll tell you what, it's the hardest thing in the world to do. It takes a ton of perseverance, and it takes a ton of hard work. The space shuttle takes off, and it burns 90% of its fuel to break free of the Earth's atmosphere. And my numbers are going to be wrong, but then it zooms around the Earth into orbit at like 4,000 miles an hour at almost zero effort. Okay, and that's what it's like. I think this is. I don't know if ag is easier or harder, than any other business, but I think that it's true that getting started and shifting a paradigm, like probably 90% of your energy is going to be in the first 20% of the implementation of your ideas. And if you can weather it, then you can zoom around 4,000 miles an hour effortlessly. Okay, yeah, it feels really good. I got to be honest. Some of the qualities, if I was to describe entrepreneurs and successful entrepreneurs, and I've been around a lot of them, way more successful than myself, because my problem is I'm just a cow dog. Like literally, like that's all I want to do is ride my horse and chase cows, right? And and I'm super happy with being able to like express my entrepreneurship and my business capabilities through ag, right? But you got way smarter people that just want to make money, and some of the things that we all probably is a pattern. Number one is hard work and perseverance. There's just no way around it. And there's a book out there that says, like, was it work smarter, not harder? Okay, good. I hope you do, because then I'll still beat you. Like, you got to work harder and you got to work smarter. And if you don't, you'll get beat by somebody. Like, and I would actually say the hard work is more important than smarts. Although in education, I believe advances you is like gets you there quicker. It takes the place, like 4 years of advanced learning can replace 10 years of experience. Okay, so you need your education. When it comes down to it, you got to get your doors open. You got to work hard. The second thing that I notice in entrepreneurs is that they do everything that they can inside their business. Like if you can't do 5 or 10 different jobs in your business, you're more likely to fail. Okay. And on my ranch, like I've taught myself how to run equipment, lay pipe, wire electrical houses and pumps, mechanic work. And this is the fun thing too, is because it's a variety. But like I'll tell you, you would have seen me yesterday morning covered in manure mucking out the stalls. I don't care. I actually wear it as a badge of honor because I'm working. And I'm not the smartest guy, but when the smart guy and even the hard worker quit working, I'm still working. Okay? I'm still working. So I'll catch you. I'll catch you. And the second most important thing, or I wouldn't even say one over the other, is that you surround yourself with good people. Great people, people that you aspire or that inspire you. And there's a study that was done, and you can name the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and you can see who you are. Okay, and it's a proven fact. Okay, so if you want to be something, and the 5 people that are around you are not that, then please, like that's brutal. Don't do that to yourself. Either change your friends or change your focus. Because you will be who you surround yourself with, okay? And I think that's overlooked, because if you want, like, be uncomfortable, be vulnerable, go and befriend somebody that you don't believe you have any business being with, but who you want to be like. And you will naturally become that person. Also, how many of you are married in here? A few of you, okay? Good, stick with it. Those of you that aren't married, listen to me. That's probably been one of the smartest moves that I ever made. Okay, because as an entrepreneur, I think we've had a lot of employees that wanted to own their own business, and they saw what we were doing and they aspired to have it. But at the end of the day, they couldn't pull it off because they were pulled in too many directions. And one of them was that their spouses spent too much money, required too much of their time, and essentially undermined their efforts, because a lot of times it didn't make sense when I worked 80 hours a week, week after week after week after week, and we're losing money, and you come home, what do you expect? Like a wife that is skimping at home. The kids haven't seen their dad. Like there's times when we were having babies, and I'd get home and I hadn't seen my kids for a week, because I would get home after they were asleep, and I would leave before they would wake up. And so I would go wake them up in the middle of the night, and I was like, oh no, like I'm so tired. Please don't wake the kids up. Like I got to see my kids. But the point is that as those kids grew up, when I did show up at home, I was a hero. Okay? That my wife wasn't complaining about no food, that notices of eviction, whatever. She was telling the kids, Dad is a hero. He is awesome. Like, if you could only be like your dad, he is fantastic. And so when I came home, like, my kids were like, oh, there he is. and so you see, it's a mindset. You see, it's a mindset we can surround yourself with. And so the opposite of that would be, I come home, here's these kids, here's these bills, this is horrible. And she's been complaining to the kids all day long. The kids think that their dad's a loser, and they don't want anything to do with them. And as soon as they can get rid of this family and this dad, they're going to do it, right? So it's just a mindset. It's so important who you surround yourself with if you want to be an entrepreneur. I'll promise you'll have tough days. So this is just one of our little businesses, and my brother and I have acquired the entire ranch from our siblings, and then we've probably, tripled or quadrupled the revenue in the holdings, and made lots of little side businesses. Another thing that are we done?
We'll wrap up as soon as you're
Okay.
done, right?
The other thing, I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. I've lived the dream, the most fantastic dream that I could have ever dreamed for a cow dog, and I believe that even though you guys are in a different era, I still believe that there's tremendous opportunities in whatever it is that you want to do in your life, whatever business you can dream up. Good planning, get to work, and we live in the greatest country in the world that still affords us these opportunities. Thank you very much.